Okay. Right. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Audit Committee. The first item on our agenda today is a quick recap of the membership in terms of reference of this committee. The committee is asked to note the membership in terms of reference as appointed by the Council at the election of myself, Stephen Watson, as the Chair of the Committee, which was appointment made by the Council on the 4th of May this year. We have 8 members of the committee. The quorum must be 3, at least 2 opposition members. Currently, the Conservative group, we have Councillor Sesford, Jackson, Oliver and Towns, who are all here today. We have, for the Labour group, Councillors Grimshaw and Wallace, who are here today. And from the Independent group, Councillor Dale, who is here today as well. I think we are still waiting for a Liberal Democrat appointee to this committee. There is one vacant position at the minute, but that still means that we're quorate. Yes, Councillor Oliver.
Chair, Councillor Towns isn't here today. He sent his apologies. He asked us to pass them on.
Yeah, that's right. So Councillor Towns has sent his apologies. Okay, but at the present time, that is the composition of our committee, as agreed by the Council at the recent meeting. There was just to reiterate the statement of purpose of the Audit Committee. Our Audit Committee at the Council is a key component of Northumberland County Council's corporate governance. It provides an independent and high-level focus on the audit, assurance and reporting arrangements that underpin good governance and financial standards. The purpose of our Audit Committee is to provide independent assurance to those charged with the governance of the adequacy of the risk management framework and the internal control environment. It provides independent review of Northumberland County Council's governance, risk management and control frameworks, and oversees the financial reporting and annual governance processes. It oversees internal audit and external audit and helps to ensure efficient and effective assurance arrangements are in place. There is a much broader and more detailed terms of reference available for this committee. I won't read it out in this committee, but it is available and it is online for anybody who wants to actually look at it, which actually goes through step by step what the terms of reference are for this committee. So I make note of that for this meeting because with the recent appointments to the committee, it's important to actually just restate that as our objective. Item 2 on the agenda is, again, apologies to absence. We sort of slightly jumped ahead of this. Andrea, we just have one apology?
Yes, Chair. Just Councillor Towns. Just
Councillor Towns. So that means we're still quorate, so that's good. Item 3, the minutes of the last meeting. Now, as usual, I think everybody's had a chance to read these. I don't propose to do a page turner and go through line by line on these. But if anybody has any questions, can we take them as an accurate copy? Agreed. Agreed. Thank you. A new item, item 4. This is something that I asked Andrea to put together because it would become apparent that some things were sort of falling through the cracks sometimes when requests were made for documents. It sometimes took a little while for them to come, and we weren't always methodically actually following them up from meeting to meeting when we were missing documents. So I thought it was worth actually putting together something that actually rectified that. Andrea suggested that other committees were using a monitoring report and action log. So I thought that was a good idea for this committee. So we're now introducing the monitoring report action log as a kind of an addendum to the normal minutes. And what this does is captures where actions have been agreed, who's doing it, when they expect it to be done, and whether it's been done. So we'll quickly go through that one. It's item number 4 in your pack. So starting on the first of the tables, reference item 1 is the report by KPMG. The report was scheduled for discussion at a future meeting of the Audit Committee. This would be action by the Interim Director of Finance, the Section 151 officer, and the Democratic Services officer who would schedule. Now, Andrea, you're looking into scheduling this discussion with the committee, I understand.
Yes, Chair. We will be meeting with Jan in due course. Okay,
so shall we take it that that's still in process and you'll speak to Jan? Hopefully for the next meeting, do you think?
Yes, hopefully. Yes.
Good, thank you. Okay.
Chair,
yep.
Thank you, Chair. Could I just ask a question about that? You may have seen that there was quite an adverse article in the press yesterday about this report, which I think to a certain extent makes a point. Can we ask for this report to be published? I've spoken to the portfolio holder, and his view, and indeed I've just actually seen he's just posted something on Facebook about it, is that there's no reason why it oughtn't to be published. I think we should be transparent. It may be that there are bits that need to be redacted for personal information, but we've all received a copy. I've read it. I think it's pretty plain. So could we make it an action point to ask the Section 151 officer whether she would be happy for it to be published, and let's just get it out there into the public domain and full transparency.
I think that wouldn't be a bad idea, to be quite honest. I think that as this report is not contentious, there will be things in there that do need to be redacted for GDPR, data protection, etc., personal privacy of data. But at the same time, the basic thrust of the report, I don't think has anything in there that could be damaging to the council, and it is probably better for the council to be seen to be putting these things out there in the public domain than actually not putting them out. So I think it's something that I would support, is unless the Section 151 officer has a particularly strong reason why we shouldn't do that. It is certainly an idea that I would suggest. So I'll leave that with me, and I'll see if we can actually get that done. Okay, thank you.
Chair, may I comment on that before we move on to the next item? Hello. So just to bring the committee up to date, I have already requested that the Information Governance team review that report and advise on whether it can be released either in a full unredacted or in a redacted form. The intention had been to publish whatever we are able to publish when that report is considered by this committee. But if the committee are happy for me to release a redacted version of the report ahead of it being considered here, then I'm more than happy to do so. But that is already in hand, and I will advise the committee once I have a view from the Information Governance team. It's not just a matter of GDPR and protection of personal data. There are also there may also be commercially sensitive details in there relating to the company. So I would also need to ensure that the Advanced Northumberland Board are also cited and are comfortable with that information being put into the public domain.
Okay.
So I will come back to you once we've had those discussions, and whatever we can publish will be published as soon as possible.
Well, thank you, Jan. That does sound like the kind of solution we were looking for. I'm seeing nodding heads around the room. Is the committee happy with that as a way forward? Yeah,
just to add to that, I absolutely fully support that line from the Section 151 officer. As a committee, we've had it circulated to us for several months now. None of us have seen anything that's at all surprising. It's a very just a normal report with nothing contentious in it whatsoever, in my view. And I see no reason why it shouldn't be published as soon as possible, and I support that view. Thank you. Okay,
thank you. I think we're in agreement, and John, that does sound like a good way forward. And obviously, you need to do your housekeeping issues and make sure that nothing is in the report that could be damaging. But I'm sure that we can leave that with yourself. I saw Councillor Dale's hand up a second ago. You got a question?
Yes, I agree with the 151. Of course, I think it's the commercial sensitivity that could be something that could be an issue, and I think it should be redacted before anything else goes out. So I have to support that.
Well, absolutely, and I'm sure we can leave that with you, Jan. Thank you for that update. That's very useful. Okay. Moving on now, then, point 2 on the action list is the external audit report. Councillor Oliver queried whether the revaluation reserve error in Advanced Northumberland would impact on the corporation tax. And this was a question for the Section 151 officer to respond on the council. And we do have you on the line, Jan. I'm not sure if you can.
Yes, I can, Chair. So the position is that the 2021 accounts for Advanced Northumberland have still not been finalised, but the expectation is that there will be a corporation tax liability. The calculations can't be finalised until the accounts have been signed off. So I will report back to the committee once that's been done. But the short answer to Councillor Oliver's question is yes, there will be a corporation tax implication. We just haven't been able to finalise the amount yet.
Okay, thank you. Well, in that case then, Jan, we'll keep that item open on this action tracker because we haven't had an actual resolution, but we have got an indication at least of where we're going with this. Thank you. Okay, sorry, Cameron.
The error isn't in advance accounts in relation to the revaluation reserve issue. The error was in the council's group accounts. So the corporation tax liability, as a result of changing the group accounts for the council, isn't going to change the position for advance at all. There is another issue. I think the two things have maybe been conflated slightly in the minutes. And I can't remember what Councillor Oliver's exact question was, but there was two issues linked to advance. One was this one, but that's because the group accounts were wrong, not advance accounts. The other issue was the Farron's claim and the release of the provision in the advanced Northumberland accounts. Now, I think the corporation tax question that Councillor Oliver asked was more to do with actually the implications of the Farron's claim rather than the error in the council's group accounts, if that makes sense. Okay. So I think Jan's answer is probably right for the Farron's claim, if that makes sense, rather than the reval reserve. But
I'll not put that back to Councillor Oliver. Are we actually on the same page?
That was the yes, and I can understand why there's been some conflation because there were two things going on at the same time. But that was my question because we were basically told that the the provision was going to be released, and I asked whether that would impact the corporation tax. So yeah.
Okay, so I think, Jan, I can see you nodding as well, so we're all on the same page with this one. It is a slightly more complicated than it first seems.
I think we are, Chair. So,
thank you.
So I'll come back to you.
Brilliant. Okay, well, if we're all happy with that, that's good. We'll await your response later on, Jan. Thank you for that. The second part of this tracker is forthcoming items. So these are the kind of general kind of standard items that we have, which are items of work which the committee will deal with as a regular basis. Now, obviously, we have a programme of work at the start of the year, so we thought it was worth keeping these in view and ticking them off as we're doing them, just to make sure nothing falls through the net. A lot of these are for the Chief Internal Auditor this time, and these are all on our current agenda. So, the Internal Audit and Risk Management Annual Report from the Chief Internal Auditor, key outcomes from internal reports, 21-22 Strategic Audit Plan, Monitoring Statement, Risk Management Update, Annual Review of Audit Committee Effectiveness, deferred from March 22 meeting, and the External Audit Update Report and the Group Audit Committee Update Report are all on today's agenda. So that's it. So we've ticked all the boxes for that. Thank you, Kevin. Okay, so we'll leave the other ones because they're for the next meetings coming forward. So that is the tracker, which takes us on to item number 5, which is disclosure of members' interest. Unless already entered into the Council's register of members' interests, members are required to disclose any personal interest, which includes any disclosable pecuniary interest they may have in any of the items included on the agenda for the meeting, in accordance with the Code of Conduct adopted by the Council on the 4th of July 2012. So if anybody has one, Councillor Sessfield, do you have the...
Yeah, there's lots of references throughout this, particularly pages 33 to 47, 59, about COVID business grants, and I have, as treasurer of this Rafa Club over in Hexham, I've applied for various grants over the years. So I just like to, I think it's non-prejudicial though.
I would take the judgment that probably is non-prejudicial. I think if you'd feel more comfortable actually in not contributing to the discussion at that point, I think you're welcome to, but I don't think it would be an issue for you to
I don't think I've got anything to add on those particular points when they come up, so if I have, I'll not.
Well, we'll note that you've disclosed okay, that. Thank you. And Councillor Grimshaw, you've got your hand up.
Just to reiterate again, Chair, that I was on the transport particular time, so I declared it myself, and also on the board of international Public Affairs as well, so just to declare it, listen, I won't be participating anyway, unless you want me to leave the
Okay.
room.
I don't think it's necessary for you to leave the room, Councillor Grimshaw, unless you feel more comfortable doing that. But I think I'm pleased that you flagged that, and I think it's right that you maybe just don't participate if the discussion moves in that direction. Okay, so that's two. Any more disclosures? Well, okay, that's good. Thank you very much. Right. Item number 6, the report of the Head of Internal Audit and Risk Management. So this one is, the purpose of the report is to provide the annual audit opinion from the Chief Internal Auditor of the overall adequacy and effectiveness of the organisation's framework of governance, risk management and control, taking into account the expectations of the Council's leadership team, audit committee and other key stakeholders. And this is yours, Kevin.
Thank you, Chair. A nice snappy title of this.
Just rolls off the tongue, doesn't it?
Indeed. Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, this report, I'm required to come to Audit Committee every year and deliver an annual opinion on the adequacy and effectiveness of the framework of governance, risk management and control. Obviously, that report is the report before committee this morning, and essentially that opinion from me gives an opinion on each of those 3 elements of the framework in terms of governance, risk management and control. So the report before committee this morning just takes each of those aspects and delivers an opinion from me. I need to point out that that's an evidenced opinion, so I can only base that opinion on work that I and the team have undertaken. But then what the report does, Chair, is just go through the work that we've undertaken during the year and the basis and the sources of assurance upon which my opinion for the year is based. There are obviously a number of sections in the report, Chair, but obviously section 5 starts where we're talking about the work that we've undertaken during the year, the assurance levels used, the number of recommendations that we've made, and a bit of a highlights run through some of the main points from our audit work during the year, as well as going through some of the other aspects which I'm required to include in the report as part of the public sector internal audit standards. And then at the very end of the report, Chair, at Annex A, there's just a list of some of the finalised reports that we've issued during the year, again, upon which my opinion is based. Chair, I'm more than happy to take any questions from members.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. It is, as you say, it's a standard report. It's one that you produce every year, and largely the same format every single time, but updated with the new figures. I'll take questions. I can see Councillor Sesford has a question.
Yeah, thanks very much. When we had this last time, Kevin, I'm referring to Annex B here, which talks about responses. I mean, last year we thought it was pretty irrelevant without a bit background detail, and I thought there was going to be background detail provided here, as in the number of responses we had. Otherwise, really, those average scores don't really make a great deal. And so I thought we were having that included this year, but there doesn't appear to be as such. I mean, it could be. I just had a quick check of it, and it could be 14 responses, which is pretty minimal, I would have thought. But
Thank you, Chair. Apologies, Councillor Sesford. I think it was 15 responses we received. I think what we do at the end of every audit assignment that we finalise is we issue that feedback to the client. What we can't do, as much as I would maybe love to be able to, is to force them to fill it in and complete it and return it. So we can only go on the responses that we receive from those pieces of work. I think part of something that we're looking at as a team during the current year is to think about that feedback and the format of it, and how we can maybe encourage more responses or deal with our feedback in a different way. So maybe when we come back with this next year, that might look a little bit different to the committee in terms of thinking about how we get that feedback in maybe a better method.
yeah, I mean, I totally agree that you can't force people to do things. However, I'm not sure if it adds much to the report. This, I don't think at this present time with those numbers and no other information that it does. But it is what it is.
Okay. Yeah, I think that sums it up. It is what it is. I mean, you cannot make people do what they won't do. Okay, I've got a quick question for you, Kevin. I'll come to and next, Councillor Dale. 5.7 of the report is actually a very useful little table there, which shows the number of recommendations made, high priority, medium priority, etc. The one thing that did jump out at me from this little table was, and if it had maybe been in a graphical form, it would have been even more obvious, is that in 2016-17 we had 245 recommendations made across the year in total, and that number started to dwindle down. It went down badly the following year, down to 89. Then it seems to have stabilised around about the 100 mark. It's now 110 for the last year, but it's still less than half the number of recommendations that it was back in 16-17. Is that an indication of less audit work being done, or what would the reason for that be? Why would we have so few recommendations comparatively over the last few years than we had 16-17?
Thank you, Chair. I think that the answer is probably a multitude of factors, and I'd need to go away and have a detailed look at that and break that down, which I'm more than happy to do, and then provide that information to the committee. I think it's possibly to do with some of the nature of the audits that we've been doing over the years more recently, which tend to be more larger corporate pieces of work rather than smaller tick and turn type pieces of work where we have a high output. So maybe some of the pieces of work that we've been doing have been sort of larger, more strategic pieces of work which have taken longer, but ultimately matter more and link back to the corporate risk register, which is where our work needs to be focused.
Right.
The exact reasons which I probably need to go away and check, Chair, but I'm more than happy to do that and provide that to the...
Right, okay. I didn't really expect you to have an answer right off the top of your head, Kevin, because there's probably a lot of factors attached to this, but it does look odd that the number has dropped so dramatically in terms of total recommendations. Would it be okay if we took an action for that one then to come back to us and just give us an opinion as to why we've lost 50% of the recommendations we used to have at one time? And Andrea, would you mind if you could put that on the action pad and we'll catch that on the next meeting? Okay, Councillor Oliver, you had a question.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Kevin. It's very comprehensive, and we this is financially, this council is very well run, and it's in a healthy position. But one of the things you allude to it in paragraph 3.36. That there's a governance review being commissioned. We've also had a section 114 notice issued yesterday. With all of the controls and all of the frameworks in the world, there can still be a situation where people overrule those frameworks and controls. So going forward, can we just give some thought to how we actually stop that happening in future, and make sure that that nobody can actually sort of work their way through these frameworks to actually create unnecessary governance and control issues?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Councillor Oliver, I think the short answer is yes. I think, and certainly at paragraph 336 that you referred to, Councillor Oliver, it is that I know there are a number of issues which are currently ongoing. Obviously, the Section 114 report has been issued since the report was written, and it's kind of wrong to prejudge what some of the outcomes of those issues would be, but absolutely any kind of governance issues which come to light through whatever method, of course, we will take, acknowledge those and see what work may need to be included in our working programmes moving forward.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. Just to pick up on that point, because obviously quite an important issue this week, which has been in the local press, is the Section 114 notice that's been issued for the council. Well, obviously, people might be interested in what this committee's position is on that. Well, just to reiterate, the process is that the council has a full meeting of the council on the 8th of June, with the starting point for the debate for the elected members to talk through this 114 notice and take a view on how they're going to take it forward. That's the starting point, if you like, and the official starting point. This committee will not take a view on this at this stage. We are not being drawn into it until the actual process and due process has gone through, but we will be getting involved in it at a later point, and it is scheduled that this committee shall have a fuller debate on this in the July meeting. So we aren't sidestepping the 114 notice at all. This is just a matter of record, just in case anybody thought we were walking past it. There is a due process in place. We will be coming to it in July, and we will be debating it fully as an audit committee, because it certainly goes to the heart of everything that we are about as a committee. As I read out in the stated standards and objectives of this committee at the start of this meeting, it goes to the heart of everything this committee is about. But the due process must take place. So we'll keep the commentary on the 114 notice to a minimum in this meeting, although I understand our external auditor has a couple of points which might come up in his summary, which touch on it, but only in terms of process again. But we'll have a full debate on that in July. So as I say, that just picks up on the point that you made, Kevin, about that. Okay, thank you. Any more comments on this? Councillor Dale, question for Kevin.
Can I comment on 5.11? And obviously the limited assurances are of always great concern. Regarding, for instance, IT, that has always been ongoing. Concerns have been raised there, but I'm concerned mostly about the limited assurance on the delivery of major capital projects, which found there was no corporate project management framework to ensure a corporate and consistent approach. And that was on major capital projects. And over the last 4 or 5 years, and over before, we've had a lot of big capital projects taking place. So I just wanted to know how many actually building projects did you look at? Because there's been a lot of big ones, large ones. Secondly, the authorities' information government arrangements still retain a limited assurance. So that is of concern to me again. So just if you could respond to that, and basically to say the last review found there had been improvements to assist with the GDPR compliance. The majority of the recommendations from the original review had not been fully implemented. So there's really sort of 3 concerns there in a way. So I wonder if you could respond, please.
Okay, thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Dale. I'll do my best to pick up all of those points. If I miss anything, please just let me know. In terms of the delivery major capital projects audit, what I would pick up there in that wording in the report is the consistent approach. So that's not to say there was no project management arrangements in place for schemes. It's just as an organisation, we needed consistency for one. So that's maybe to explain what that was. In terms of how many projects we looked at, I can't give you an exact number, Councillor Dale, but I know that we picked a sample of some different from different areas, both from sort of education side, from non-education. So we tried to pick a sample of different projects. I can certainly find that out and clarify that if that would be helpful. But as I say, I think that the key word in that sentence is about the consistent approach corporately. With regard to the information governance arrangements, obviously given the nature of information governance and the limited assurance, that's in our plan again to look at this year, and that's recognised both within the service, the management area and so on, and executive team more widely. I think when we had definitely seen that improvement had been made, it's just they hadn't gone all the way to be fully implemented, but it's clear that progress is being made towards full implementation. So I would hope when we go back and look again this year, the team are very keen for us to go back to kind of give that assurance that yes, we've done what needs to be done, and then in turn to you as a committee. So that will be being followed up in the current year once all of that activity has been undertaken in the service area.
I just wonder, to add to that, that if officers are doing everything, that maybe we should add that members maybe need to have an update on our position as councillors and according to the GDPR rules and regs.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. There was a point in there, Kevin, I noticed when you offered to provide an update. Is that one we can capture for a future meeting?
Certainly, Chair. If I can certainly include something in the future meeting, just to kind of to give a bit more detail about the sample of the work that we undertook. That's so fine.
If we can capture that on the update log as well, please, Andrea, that would be useful. Thank you, Kevin. Okay, well, as I said, it's a fairly standard report. It's a good report. Any more questions and we move on? Councillor Grimshaw has a question.
Thank you. It's just actually a comment, if you don't mind. Going back to page 33, schools' financial value standard. And I'm a little bit perturbed, on the state of the schools at this present moment in time with regard to the impact on their budgets, etc. And I don't know whether there's a lot more work to be looked at there, Kevin, because obviously their budgets obviously include heating, and eating, etc. And I just wondered if, we could just have an updated report on this, because this is an area of grave concern with the children that we look after in schools. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Grimshaw. The school's financial value standard is a specific process that has to be undertaken by all grant-maintained schools. And it's a self-assessment undertaken by schools, and that's something that we then collate and pull together for the Section 151 officer, who has to make a statutory return by the end of May. So that's what that work is about. In addition to that, as part of our programme of work, we've just recently finalised some work looking at a thematic review across schools. So obviously we sometimes can't get out to see every school and undertake an audit of every school. So what we've done in more recent years is try and take a sample of schools across the county, different size of school, different type of school, to then go in, do sample visits, and then provide both feedback to the individual schools, but then wider feedback to all schools, just so they get the benefit of some of those findings, even though we haven't been able to attend that school. So what we can certainly do, because the review that we've just finalised, or in the process of finalising, looked at measures in place for the management of their local bank account scheme. So this is always something that we can then think in terms of budgetary controls, maybe the next theme for when we go out to do. We'll certainly bear that in mind, Councillor Grimshaw.
Okay, thank you. Is that satisfactory for your purposes, Councillor? Thank you. And I noticed Peter Topping here had a hand up as well. Peter.
Thank you, Chair. Just to, I guess, support the point that Councillor Dale made about the major capital projects. I mean, my experience from other local authorities in other parts of the country is that if there is a dispute with the contractor on a capital project, and let's hope there aren't disputes, but if there was, then in litigation the contractor would use any potential inconsistencies in the project management framework as an argument as to why something had gone off track or whatever. So it is very important in terms of capital projects for this to be well nailed down. And I take the assurances that the Chief Internal Auditor has given us, but it's just to reinforce the point that Councillor Dale made. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Yes, I think that is a good point, isn't it, Kevin? In terms of this gives real room to people to actually get out of their responsibilities if it's not nailed down.
Yes, thank you, Jen. Thank you, Peter. I think I just note Peter's comments. I think when we began this piece of work, it was something that was actively sought from the service manager involved, who was very kind of keen for Audit to come in and do this piece of work for him. So it was not a case of done to, it was being asked to come in and provide that sort of assurance to the team. So probably very mindful of some of the points that Mr. Topping's making. So
absolutely, absolutely. Thank you. Okay, well, if there are any more questions, if not seeing any show of hands. So, okay, well, I thank Kevin for that report. And hopefully we'll see some update on that and the points that we've taken from that in future meetings. No more questions on that. We'll move on. We'll move on, not very far because it's Kevin again. So the key outcomes from internal audit reports is item number 7 in your paper pack. Thank you, Kevin.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Chair, this is a report which we bring to Audit Committee twice a year, and just with some more details of reports that we finalised in the preceding 6-month period. So this is a report covering November 2021 to May 2022, and just gives an Audit Committee a bit of an oversight summary of some of the reports that we finalised within that period, and a flavour of some of the findings from those pieces of work in a little bit more detail. Chair, the main, so I would just draw members' attention to the table which starts on page 49 in the papers, where we just on each page we just take a piece of work in turn. Obviously included within there are some of the school local bank account reports, which I've just alluded to in the earlier agenda item, and just an idea of what the audit was intended to look at, what we found as part of the work, the good practice highlighted, because we always do find good practice in the pieces of work that we do, and it's right that we provide that balance. We do obviously also find issues and issue recommendations, and then it's a little bit about what's happened since the report was issued or the follow-up action that will be undertaken. Later on in the report, Chair, we just talk about some of the evidence checking that we undertake routinely. Sometimes it's kind of the way the recommendation dates fall. Sometimes we're not able to go straight out and do the evidence checking. We have to allow time for those recommendations to be implemented before we can check, which is why at the back there's the table from previous reports where we do then go out and subsequently undertake that evidence checking just to give the committee that reassurance. Obviously, where it's a limited assurance report, they would normally be followed up with another report in the following year anyway, so we know we're going to be picking up on all of those recommendations as part of the next review. And again, Chair, just at the end of the appendix there at section 6, just a bit of a brief overview of some of the other work that we've been undertaking, primarily around the COVID scheme, which continue, the National Fraud Initiative, the Schools Financial Value Standard, and some of the grant certifications, just because they don't ultimately end up in the issue of a report as such. So it's just so on a committee get that oversight as to the work that we're undertaking. But again, happy to take any questions, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. I think from my point of view, I do like this report a lot because it gives you the granularity of the work that's being done by internal audit, and it's quite good to be able to actually see the things like the issues identified and priority recommendations. Good practices highlighted. That's something that very often gets missed. Auditors are very often accused of just looking for the negatives all the time, but good practices have been identified all throughout these reports, which is good, and the progress and the action being taken is essential to make sure that we're not just talking to ourselves in effect by making recommendations that go nowhere, so we can see the progress. As a piece of work, I find this very, very useful as a chair of an audit committee. Happy to take questions. Councillor Oliver, I think you just got your hand up first.
Thank you, Chair. Just on the two areas you've looked at in terms of revs and bends, council tax and business rates, good to see broadly there's a lot of positive stuff happening. I'm aware that some of their software systems are quite old and not quite sort of Rolodex and abacuses, but sort of are there still plans to sort of update the software systems and to just try and help make that department more efficient and rely less on paper? And then the other question was around the updating the information from the valuation office. I know that was in 2020 and 2021 when that department suddenly had to deal with all of the many millions of pounds of business grants. So was that the reason effectively that fell behind, because they were dealing with all of this other work at the time?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think in relation to the second question, Councillor, I think yes, given obviously that happened at the beginning of 2020, that had a knock-on effect, and obviously business rates were highly prioritising the payment of the initial grants at the outset. So yes, as I sit here, my recollection is that is indeed part of the factor that happened there. Jan may wish to kind of comment a bit more widely on that, but that's my understanding too. With regards to the updating of the system, again, that's probably one for Jan and the service area to update on. It's something that we keep under constant review, and we also, as part of our planned work in terms of IT systems, have a bit of a rolling programme in terms of our coverage of the IT systems, and it's one that we keep reviewing to see when systems are updated, how we kind of then look at those to make sure the systems are done correctly and give us the proper areas of control as part of that as well.
Okay, I'll bring Jan in a second there. The IT question is one that I think it was in the previous report as well. There was a limited assurance on network controls as well in there, and I think it seems to have been a historic sort of area, the whole network security, network updates, etc. Now, do you feel that you're getting much traction on IT, particularly in terms of, it struck me that this seems to be a repeated problem and we don't seem to get much further forward with it. Is that a fair comment, do you think?
Thank you, Chair. Well, it's a fair comment. Obviously, that's the comment that you've noted. I think what I would say is that we do prioritise ICT coverage as part of our work programme, because we know the degree to which the organisation relies on information technology in order to function, especially as we're moving more and more into the digital environment and platform, that's increasing. So I suppose as part of that, the checks that we're undertaking on ICT are arguably getting harder and harder and harder. What I would say though, specifically from the Director of ICT, is the commitment to put all of these issues right. We are always welcomed into the ICT service to try and help. It's never a done to or anything like that. It's working very much with them. We can always see that action has been or is being taken in all kind of matters that we find. It just may be that it hasn't resulted in the final implementation of issues, so to speak. I know there was one high priority mentioned, high priority recommendation within this report relating to an IT system, and again I think that action's already been taken to put that right. I must kind of stress in relation to that, we didn't find actually any evidence of anything, any breaches in terms of the controls. It's just the possibility was there. So again, we always would make that recommendation just to protect all of the systems in place. So I don't think it's fair to say that we're not getting the traction from ICT. Obviously, kind of ICT are dealing with a number of different priorities, as we can imagine. But that we can see that they are making progress along the
So I suppose my question to you was do you feel fairly comfortable as the Chief Internal Auditor that the traction that you're getting is right, and that the direction of travel for ICT and the control of the risk environment is going in the right direction then?
I think, Chair, yes, is the short answer, yes. Okay. I'm not sitting here being really worried to the contrary.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm going to bring Jan in next, Councillor Dale, because obviously he's come on the line to actually answer, just to pick up on a couple of the questions that Councillor Oliver asked just a few minutes ago. So, Jan, can I pass that on to you? Kevin sort of passed a couple of the questions in your direction. Could you comment? You're on mute, Jan.
Sorry, I unmuted and then muted myself again. So the answer to the question about whether we have any plans to replace the revenues and benefit systems is not immediately. We did consider whether it was feasible to conduct a full reprocurement in this financial year with a view to having any new arrangements in place for next year, but because of the complexity of the systems and the length of time required for migration to any new arrangements, we decided that that was not feasible. But what we are doing is upgrading to the enterprise browser-based version of the current system. And that will bring significant additional functionality and hopefully will address some of the operational issues that we have with the current system. As part of the transformation programme, we are looking at what investment is required to upgrade our IT systems more generally to support a more efficient and streamlined operation on a day-to-day basis, not just in revenues and benefits, but across the piece. And we do have a new CRM system, PlaceCube, which we're doing a lot of work on in terms of how that integrates with our revenues and benefits systems. Very mindful of the fact that revenues and benefits accounts for a very high proportion of our day-to-day customer interactions. So it's important that we get that right. We only have a limited amount of IT resource. Recruitment and retention in that service is a significant challenge. It's not the only part of the council that's facing that challenge, but we do seem to have particular problems in recruiting and retaining skilled IT professionals. And that is a practical constraint that we have to work within. So we're having to prioritise. But as I said, the migration to the latest browser-based enterprise version of Northgate is a priority for us. You know, we are planning to do that in the coming year. And as for the longer-term plan, I think it's a question of watch this space because we're still developing that. So I hope that's covered all of your questions, Councillor Oliver.
It does, thank you. That's really encouraging. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jan. Yeah, that's very comprehensive. Thank you for that. So there's a lot of work to be done, obviously, in the world of IT, and certainly in bringing new systems in and browser-based functionality, etc., which is obviously going to be a lot more, I would hope, resilient for the operation as a whole. So we'll watch this space, and we'll rely on Kevin to actually bring us updates as the year goes on of how things are going. So thank you, Jan. Okay, so if there's any more questions on this particular report of Kevin's, one from Councillor Dale.
Thank you. Sorry, just to go back to the limited assurance before, and I note that you've actually, the comments you've made, or the main issues identified, and actually it's great that they're actually doing something about it and they're acting on it, which is good, because that's what audit's for, and I think it gives you some assurance that actually the council is actually listening to what audit recommends. Can I just say about these schools, because I think a long time ago we used to give the schools help when we had new accounts people coming in to run the accounts. The high schools, I think, are probably better because they've actually got proper controls in place, and it's a much bigger financial but the small schools are and do have difficulties, and it's actually about the controls and them understanding controls. And when they're short of staff, actually working it together. So can I just say, I mean, there's only 1 or 2 schools, and we've got a lot of maintained primary first schools, so just a few, and therefore everybody is actually doing a really good job, especially in this climate as well, where they haven't been at school. But the other thing is, do we still give them any help, or do you still do the well, they used to have, I think it was the school's education department, or the education department, we used to send people out, and they used to have meetings and briefings about updates, etc., on school financial controls, etc.
Okay, Kevin, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Councillor Dale, as far as I'm aware, yes, that's still there. And I guess what we also get, both as part of this piece of work, is helping and working with schools.
Yeah.
And we also have a number of approaches from schools during every year, both formally in terms of the SFVS process, where we often get a number of calls from schools, and we just talk through, provide advice and that sort of thing. But we also get it outside of that process as well from schools, just can I just check with you how I'm going to do something or anything, and also as part of some of the work that we've undertaken, where the audit's actually turned into a discussion to say, well, okay, this is how we think you can put the controls in place. I think, Councillor Dale, you make a good point in terms of the resources available with differing size schools, and sometimes what we have to do is the work that we do and the recommendations we make have to be proportionate to the size of the school. Yeah. It's no point saying you have to have 3 people in this process if the school only has 2 in their office. So it's working with schools to think how best every school can implement the controls required, and those recommendations might be different for different settings. So that's something we always bear in mind.
Can I just add, just going through, the assurance opinion in the report is actually, it's quite broad. So you've got full, significant, and then you've got limited. So, the audit work that you're doing is actually, it's very broad, but you've got a lot of good findings and good practice, and then you've got the odd ones which, but you do home into them. So thank you for that.
Okay. Thank you for that, Councillor Dale, and thank you for your response, Kevin. If there's any more questions, no, can't see any. Okay, well, thank you for that report, Kevin. Again, very good, very comprehensive, and obviously things we're going to keep a track on as the year goes on. But thank you for that, and thank you, Jan, for your intervention as well. Item number 8 on our agenda is the next item. Now, we don't have any reports for this because this is a verbal update, again from Kevin, on the annual review of the Audit Committee effectiveness. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, apologies, it's me again. Chair, as we noted at the tracking agenda item earlier in the agenda, there was a report scheduled to come to this committee on the proposed work plan around the annual review of Audit Committee effectiveness. Obviously, committee will be aware we normally undertake a bit of a self-assessment process against the recommendations in the SIPFA guidance document. I think very recently, SIPFA have issued a new position statement for audit committees in local government. It's not materially different to the one that was already in place, but there are changes in terms of some of the language used and the terminology. So there is guidance, a new guidance document to follow, but that yet hasn't been issued by SIPFA. So what we'd propose, Chair, is to defer undertaking that self-assessment when we know there's a new position statement and brand new guidance imminently being issued. And what we do is, assuming that guidance is issued in time, we'll undertake that review and bring it to the next meeting of the committee so that it is as up to date as we can possibly have.
That makes perfect sense, Kevin. So in that case, then, Andrew, if we could make a note of the action log, that standing item is going to be in the next meeting, not in this one. It's been deferred. So is that okay, Kevin? Okay, thank you. So I don't think there's much more we need to say on that one. I think you're right to actually hold back until you get the full guidance. There's no point in going too soon. Okay, so the next item is item number 9, the report of the external auditor. It's the progress report, which is from Cameron. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to work on the basis that people have read the report. In terms of the key messages, since the last meeting, we have completed the work on the benefits claim that you have to submit every year to DWP. So there was some additional testing required because we did find some errors in terms of doing that work, but that was submitted off to DWP in line with the revised timetable that had been agreed with them by the Council. Nothing hugely significant, to be honest. We find issues everywhere we do testing on benefits because it's so complicated and there's such a high caseload. So nothing particularly to draw to your attention in relation to the findings. In terms of the audit of the 2021 accounts, you probably recall, Chair, that at the last meeting we highlighted there are quite a few areas where work was still ongoing. I'm pleased to say that working with Jan and Alison, who I can see sitting more or less opposite me, we've managed to resolve quite a few of those issues. So in particular, we've managed to resolve the issues around about the valuation of the Council's land and buildings, with some amendments required to the accounts to do with the valuation methodology again. We're hoping we might have bottomed all the valuation methodology issues now, but probably famous last words. The other issue was a local issue around about infrastructure assets, so you build your roads, culverts, bridges, etc. We've managed to, with quite a lot of work on the part of officers and cooperation, bottom that issue, but what actually that's meant is some of the assets you'd written out of your accounts, you've had to write back in again, essentially, because actually you did find some evidence that they did actually exist and you owned them, which is a good result. On infrastructure in particular, though, I think I briefed the committee at the last meeting, there is a national issue that's ongoing. SIPFA are consulting on that just now with a fix in the short term with a longer term goal to come up with something that will solve the issue in the future periods. What's happened in practical terms, you'll see it in the report, is all of the audit suppliers have paused their audits for 2021 where those haven't been completed to wait on the results of the consultation and then think about what that means for individual clients. So that applies to Northumberland too. You'll see from the report, I'm not going to go through every single thing. The key areas of amendment have been around about the group to do with the advance reserves FARNs, PPE because of valuation methodology and a few other issues, pensions because of nothing to do with the council, just the volatility in the final quarter. And then there's been quite a lot of disclosure amendments as well in different bits and pieces. Without going into the section 114 notice, section 114A notice from Monday, you'll see from the report that two of the areas where we haven't completed our work relates to the disclosure in relation to senior officer remuneration, which is relevant to section 114A, around about the international allowance, and secondly in relation to exit packages where we're still in discussion with Jan around about some of the issues that may or may not exist in relation to disclosures in that note. In relation to the senior officer's remuneration, you'll be aware, Chair, that for 1920 we issued the opinion on the accounts. We had issued the work on whole of government accounts, but not value for money. So clearly we will be considering our value for money conclusion in light of the section 114. We will also be considering the need to include wording in the certificate specific to the note in 1920 accounts about senior officer remuneration. We are undergoing a process internally at the moment to make sure we do exactly the right thing with the council in terms of disclosures in the accounts, but also the impact that has on our audit reports and the certificate as well for 1920, and also for value for money. The position in relation to the wider value for money issues remains, we're waiting for the 8th of June council meeting. where we understand that the Solace team will be presenting the findings from the review, and then anything arising from that report we will discuss as appropriate with officers and potentially with Solace, and consider that in the context of both 1920 value for, well actually 1920 value for money conclusion, the 2021, whether or not there are significant weaknesses, there already clearly are in relation to section 114, and actually also whether or not there's anything that's new for 21-22 that may not have been applicable in prior years that again we have to consider in terms of weakness and recommendations. On top of that, clearly we would also have to consider whether or not there is any need for us to consider the use of our powers under the 2014 Act. But that, Chair, is for a future audit committee, I think, because it's far too early to say conclusively what, if any, action we're actually proposing to take. So I'm not going to say much more than that, because I don't think I need to. I think the report's quite clear in terms of the work we've completed, whether there are issues arising from that. We'll be bringing the audit completion report, the proposal is to bring that to the July meeting, I think, along with the plan for 21-22, which has been delayed because of the completion of the 2021 audit. But I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Cameron. That's admirably clear, and I think the report itself is clear. So I think you're quite correct and prudent to actually hold back on some of these things. There's so much stuff in train at the minute with the section 114 and the meeting on the 8th of June that will obviously indicate which direction of travel you go in for future reference, but we'll obviously keep track of this through this committee. Any questions on this particular report for Cameron at the present time? Councillor Dale.
Yeah, just to ask very quickly, sorry, just under property, plant and equipment, and you've done the complete work. I just wondered the amount the schools that have come out of that are no longer owned by the school property that are actually are transferred to new trusts. I don't know how much that is, but is that put actually into the report or into the account?
Alison might be better answering this question, but
sorry, Alison.
If the question is when a school attains foundation status, does the asset remain in the council's balance sheet? The answer is the asset shouldn't remain in the council's balance sheet. It should go to the school. Yeah. Notwithstanding some of the other complexities associated with that transfer. I know. But I'm not sure if that's the question that you're asking.
I just want to know if actually, to be quite honest, I can't remember what the accounts say about schools' assets and whether they're singled out, but whether actually that is shown as, you know, a loss, not a loss, but well, it is a loss to the council taxpayer of the value of the school when it's transferred.
I don't think it's shown. It's shown as a disposal. Yeah. Sorry, I've switched my microphone off. You can probably still hear me though. Yeah. It's shown as a disposal,
thank you.
Essentially, but any sort of profits and losses of disposal of assets, are written back out via statutory override through into the MERS to make sure that they don't actually have an impact on council tax.
No, I just.
Same with depreciation and pensions as well, essentially.
It's just a recognition that there's a disposal. I think that's the thing I'm asking for.
Can I just ask Alison, is that your understanding? Is that the way it works? And sorry, because you don't regularly attend the meeting. What's your job title? So that
I'm the Service Director for Finance.
Service Director for Finance. So you're a subject expert on this. So
I can say that, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Yes, Councillor Dale. The schools that attain academy status, we do dispose of those assets in the accounts. There is no bottom line impact for the council taxpayer, and usually in our accounts there is usually an event after the reporting period for any known academies that have converted after the year end, and we usually note those in the accounts as well.
I just want to know how. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Alison. Okay, well, any more questions for external audit arising from this report? I think it's a very clear report, and I thank Cameron for presenting it. So we move on. Item number 10 on our agenda. Give me a chance to start sorted here. Urgent business. Well, no urgent business has been brought to my attention, so we have no urgent business in this meeting. The date and time of the next meeting will be Wednesday, the 27th of July at 10:15 for the main meeting and 9:30 for the pre-meeting as usual. So part 2 of this meeting, it's expected that matters included in this part of the agenda will be dealt with in private. Reports referred to are enclosed for members and officers only. These are the coloured pink on your pack and marked not for public publication. The exclusion of press and public. The committee is invited to consider passing the following resolution that under section 100A of the Local Government and Finance Act 1972, the press and public should be excluded from the meeting during consideration of the following items. Are we okay? Do I have a proposal for that? Yes, Councillor Dale, and the second, Councillor Oliver. Thank you. So in that case, I'll ask IT to switch off the YouTube feed. Please let us know when it's switched off.